Freezer Pro is a web-based frozen sample management application that can be used to manage and track experiment samples. In previous LabKey releases, we added support for integrating and synchronizing sample inventory data from a Freezer Pro instance into the LabKey server. With this previous implementation, administrators could configure column mappings between the incoming Freezer Pro fields and the LabKey specimen columns, and add basic filters to the Freezer Pro data that is loaded into the LabKey specimen tables. With this 16.2 release of LabKey, we extended those Freezer Pro configuration items to allow custom LabKey specimen fields to be added directly from the Freezer Pro configuration UI, and to allow for a fuller set of filter comparator options when filtering the incoming Freezer Pro data. So to show these new features, I've created a LabKey study folder here on my local server, and I've enabled the Freezer Pro module. So I'm going to start by going to the Manage tab on my study, and at the bottom of here of the list of links, I have a Configure Freezer Pro option. The connection tab of the Freezer Pro configuration has not changed. The main set of changes are in the specimen fields section and the filters section. I'm going to start with specimen fields and click on that tab to show how we changed the way that Freezer Pro fields can be mapped to the LabKey specimen fields when the data is loaded. So I'm going to start by clicking on this Edit Specimen Field Configurations icon, which is going to open, as it did in the previous release, the Edit Specimen Configuration dialog. So this part of the dialog has not changed. It allows me to see the list of sample types for my Freezer Pro instance and select the types that I want to load into this specific LabKey study folder. The first change I want to talk about for the 16.2 release is here on the next tab of the wizard for the specimen field mapping. The display here is very similar, where on the left-hand side I see the full list of LabKey fields for my specimen domains, and connected to that I see the Freezer Pro field drop-downs, which I can use to map my incoming Freezer Pro data to my LabKey specimen fields. The change that was made was that we now show in this drop-down of Freezer Pro fields only the fields that can be mapped into the field type for the LabKey specimen field. So for example, this subject ID field in the LabKey specimen tables is a text field, so I see a list of all of the text fields in addition to dates or booleans. Basically all the fields in Freezer Pro can be mapped into a text field, so that hasn't changed. However, when I go to a date field such as draw date, you'll see that the list is now much shorter. So these are only the date fields from the Freezer Pro set of fields that can be mapped. Another example is the primary volume field in the LabKey specimen domain is a numeric field. So that dropdown will only contain the numeric fields from the Freezer Pro list of fields. The second new feature for 16.2 to this dialog is if there's a Freezer Pro field that I want to load into my study folder that doesn't have a corresponding LabKey specimen domain field, I can now add that directly from this UI to define the new custom LabKey field that will be added to the specimen domain for this study, and then do that mapping from the Freezer Pro field. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new field here for processing location by defining the name and label. I'm going to leave type as string, but it does allow for the standard set of types that can be added to the specimen domain from the other UI, which I will show in a second. But when I click add, now I get a new LabKey field option where I can then map my processing location field from Freezer Pro to that custom LabKey field. The new field, however, is not created yet until I click the Save button from the Freezer Pro configuration. That's because we could add a custom field and decide you don't need it and remove it. So that field creation actually happens on save. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save here for my Freezer Pro configuration. And just to show where that is in fact created, if I go over to the Manage tab of my study and click on the Edit Specimen Properties, I'm going to see a list of the LabKey specimen domains, in this case specimen event, and at the bottom of this list is my new proc location field that was automatically added from the other UI when I saved my configuration. Because of the way that the Freezer Pro field mappings work, we also created the same field proc location in the vial domain. So if I scroll down to the bottom of that domain, we will also see proc location created there as well. So I'm going to go back to my Freezer Pro configuration to show you the last change we made for the 16.2 release, and that is to the Filters tab. So now that I've defined my specimen field mappings for my Freezer Pro configuration, I can go to Filters to reduce the set of rows that are going to be loaded when I click the Reload Specimen Data button here. The ability to pick a column that you want to filter on hasn't changed. So for example, if I wanted to filter on that processing location field I added, the change is to the set of filter types. So previously we hard-coded this list to only allow you to do equals filters, but now you'll see the standard set of filter options that you would get from a LabKey data region, for example. And these set of options are based on again, the field type. So in this case, processing location was a string type field. So I see a long list of the filter options, some of which will require a field. So equals, contains, starts with, those type of filters require you to enter a value to filter on. And some of them, like is blank or is not blank, do not require a field. So that will be disabled when you choose that option. As another example, for example, if I pick the draw date field, you'll see now the filter type options is much smaller. So these are the types that apply to date fields. And I can apply a filter, in this case, to the draw date field, and in fact I can apply multiple filters to the same field, very similar to what you can do from a LabKey data region. So I can apply a draw date filter of greater than and less than, and these will be ANDed together when the specimen reload actually happens. The last piece I wanted to show was that we do some validation on save. So if I try to add a filter but haven't filled in the value, clicking save will in fact give me an error message saying that a filter value is required for that particular filter. If I did not need that filter, I can remove it at any time using the X on the right-hand side. All of these new features for specimen field mapping and filters are reflected in the Advanced tab. So another small change we made was when I view the Advanced tab, I can switch between configuration through the UI or configuration from an XML format. So you'll see this XML format has been updated to reflect changes I made in the other tabs of this Freezer Pro configuration UI. And likewise, when I have the XML version enabled, now that when I go back to like the Filter tab, it is in a read-only state since we are defining this study to use the XML version of configuration. Likewise, for the specimen field, I no longer have the edit option on my specimen configuration header here. That is because I've switched over to do XML configuration. So the interaction between these two configuration types has been updated in the 16.2 release as well.